Today we're going to talk about how so many people end up in these narcissistic or emotionally abusive or emotionally neglectful relationships. I'm inspired to make this video because I've been following this really wonderful podcast that Dr. Ramani makes, and I will link in the description below. She was interviewing Debbie Newell, the last woman who was dating Dirty John. There was a show made about it. She wrote a book about it, and she was actually a very successful woman with 4 wonderful children who got taken in by this guy and fell for this guy who love bombed her. And what we traditionally are told is that people who fall for these narcissistic relationships are just reliving the kind of home they grew up in. They had a narcissistic father or a narcissistic mother. Before I continue on with this video, yes, that bike has a flat tire. In some of my videos, some people felt the need to tell me that my bike tire is flat. And actually, the reason it's flat, because I don't ride it anymore. I don't like riding on the street. I do weightlifting, Pilates, running, rowing, VersaClimber, some swimming, box jumps, plyometrics. I do all that. Like, I have a pretty good fitness routine. I do Pilates, I do personal training, and I probably do about an hour a day of exercise. Oh, and I do hot yoga once a week, because I do not feel safe competing with the cars. I have a car now, a new car, where, when I replace my car, the bike rack no longer fits on the back of this vehicle. The bike rack for the vehicle I have now goes on top of the vehicle. And I cannot lift that bike on top of my vehicle to go and take it to a place where I feel safe to ride. So I looked into getting like a hitch and a bike rack that will go onto the hitch. The hitches, to have it put on, is like $800 or something with the hitch and the installation. It's something I don't want to do. So I do like the bike being there, and maybe one day I will ride it. If I ever find a boyfriend who's got a truck, he will take me. He will help me with the bike. He can blow up the tire and take me. So this is a project waiting for a man. And I just like the bike being there. If the flat tire bothers you, then don't watch my video or just focus. I do not even see why people feel the need to comment on my home. You may as well also comment. If you're going to comment on anything, you should comment on the fact that I don't even get dressed up to make these videos, or that I'm old, or that I, have a kitchen apron hanging in my kitchen. But let's get back to the video. I like Dr. Ramani's interview style on these narcissism videos, because unlike many other videos on narcissism, which focus on things that the narcissist does, she is really focused on how the survivor feels, what was going on for the survivor internally, that she missed the red flags, overlooked the red flags, and what was her experience being in that relationship, and how did she learn to get out of it. And she has a very gentle approach. And then once in a while, she has a little segment she puts in where she explains certain terms. And I really like it because it's very gentle. It's not jarring and pushing. And what I was really struck in this interview was that Debbie Newell was very insistent that her father was perfect. And her parents had this very loving marriage. And that she grew up very Christian and about being forgiving and being kind. So that's one thing that struck me. And her voice the survivor's voice is very sweet, very kind, kind of like very sweet, very doting, very gentle. Almost like, I don't know if it's a mask, but there was no force in it. Like, she sounded very gentle. But I got very interested in her because she was married 5 times. That Dirty John was the 5th guy. And I got curious how she ended up in this relationship with this very narcissistic, controlling man who was violent and stalkerish and ended up trying to kill her daughter, but she will not admit that. She said he was just trying to kidnap her daughter, and then her daughter ended up shooting the guy. He's dead now, the Dirty John guy. So I've been pondering this, and I have some answers. I have some answers which are going to help all of us in relationship that came out of this, but also a couple more things about Debbie Newell, and I'm not picking on her. However, I'm going to challenge the notion that her childhood was as perfect as she thinks. That's what I want to get at here. I think that her parents were living in a fake positivity bubble, and I think she blocked out a lot of things, and she didn't know what she didn't get. A lot of us that grow up emotionally neglected, childhood emotional neglect, we don't know it because we don't know what we didn't get. You know, if you weren't hit, you don't know that you were supposed to learn about boundaries and consent and having your feelings honored. And one more thing I want to say about her family is that the sister was killed by the boyfriend. I think his name was Billy. He killed her sister, and the mom forgave the guy the next day, and he was even allowed to live with them after that. So there's this disregard for reality, disregard for feelings and anger. Debbie did say that her parents never fought, and I thought of that because I was married to a guy whose parents never fought, and he had trouble with, showing his anger, and I started thinking about a little boy that I know who, one of my friend's sons, she raises him with so much regard for his feelings. Like, they talk about his feelings the way that parents do nowadays. Like, how do you feel? You can say when you're angry. And he's very emotionally self-expressed, respectful, and he knows how he feels. But the point being that children don't know what they didn't learn. And in the comments on the video, Dr. Ramani was really slammed by quite a few people for letting Debbie get away with saying that her childhood was perfect. Because if your childhood was so perfect, why are you married 5 times? Why do you end up with this abusive guy? Why was your sister killed by her husband? Was it really that perfect? Why did the mother take him in? And why is she talking in this very super kind voice, like a little kid voice? Now, Debbie was a very successful businesswoman, okay? She was very successful, and her kids seemed like on top of it. Her kids didn't like him. This is what I want to get to, because I was married to someone where I didn't feel like, I didn't know how to express my feelings. I tried to be okay with, or push away, or figure things out. The point being that children have to learn what their feelings are, okay? And they can only learn what their feelings are if it's mirrored to them. Children have to learn their feelings by having their feelings mirrored to them. What does that mean? Oh, you feel angry. This is how you can express it. Oh, you feel disappointed. I can see why you're disappointed. Oh, Johnny doesn't want to play with you. I see that makes you sad. Children must have their feelings mirrored to them. That's number one. And I do not think that this happened in Debbie's household, because she didn't really know what her feelings were. She was going on the mental level of, I must be kind, I must be subservient, I must be submissive, I must be forgiving. And that is a lot of what that Christian value teaching is, which is, you know, it overlooks how it puts so much emphasis on turning the other cheek and being kind, that people are abandoning themselves in the service of the relationship or the kindness or the submission. So children need to have their feelings mirrored. Number 2, children have to learn the concept of boundaries. And the way that they learn boundaries is by not just being told what they can and cannot do. That's a parent giving a boundary, but also being free to say what they like and don't like and what they want and don't want. If children have never had the right or the experience of saying, Mommy, I don't like when you talk to me this way. Daddy, I don't like when you say you're taking me somewhere and you don't. If they never get that practice around boundaries, then they don't even know the concept. And the third part is needs. I only learned about boundaries and needs after my divorce, so I'm not blaming anyone, okay? I think most kids grew up without having their feelings mirrored and without having their boundaries or their needs mirrored or being taught that there is such a thing. And a lot of people grew up in homes where there was either explosive anger or we don't do anger. So there's a repression, and if you've never experienced something, you don't know when it's missing. So for example, when Debbie went on that first date with John, he took her out. Well, first of all, she had him come over to pick her up, which was a little too trusting. She was overly trusting. And that also has to do with, there might have been a part of her, I'm guessing, that thought, he's the man, I like him, I want to be trusting. And that's just learning that you don't have to be trusting right away to be the good girl, okay? I think there was a lot of bypassing things, but nonetheless, he picked her up, and when he dropped her off, he came inside, and she was in the kitchen, and then when she walked by, she noticed he was sitting on her bed, just leaning back, waiting for her to come sit by her, and that was that's a very disturbing thing. I would have been like, no, you're out of here, this is not okay. It's very forward, and she told him, this isn't okay, get off the bed. And he acted all pissy and stormed out, which is a super red flag, but she didn't see it as a red flag. She thought, well, maybe I was too rude to him, whatever. And the next day he apologized, and she took him back. And in her mind, she's like, I gave him a boundary, good for me. But what she failed to realize was how he violated and dismissed her boundary, because she never had that experience of having her boundaries validated, of having her feelings validated, of having her needs validated. And this is what you have to do. If you grew up in a house like Debbie where everything was perfect, first of all, if you tell me your childhood is perfect, I'm going to tell you there's a 99% chance you're in denial, 100% chance you're in denial, because there is no perfect childhood. And one thing in therapy that's very challenging for therapists, and that was for me when I was coaching people, was getting them to admit that their parents had any flaws. So many people are so protective of their parents, they have blacked out anything that was not so good, or they don't know what wasn't so good. They don't know what they were missing. So ideally, I'm going to give you a few examples of boundaries, needs, and feelings, and you've got to start feeling it in your body so that when you're around someone who violates any of this, you will automatically know. But if you've never experienced it in your body, you will not know that you're violated. So, for example, in the case where he was on the bed, first of all, that was inappropriate to go into a woman's house and just sit down on her bed in her bedroom without being invited to. That's very inappropriate. Okay. The same way that I wouldn't go into a man's house and open his refrigerator or his cupboards. It's inappropriate. But when she said, I don't want you sitting on my bed, he would have said, thank you for telling me how you feel. I was way too forward. The ideal response when someone tells you what they like or don't like is, thank you for telling me how you feel. Okay, if you get anything else, someone who dismisses you, argues with you, tries to turn it around and blame you for even thinking that, run. Okay, so if you were to say to me, if I were to say to you, hey, can you lend me $100? And you say no. And then I would say, thank you for telling me how you feel. Let that sink into your body. When you give someone a boundary and they tell you, thank you for telling me how you feel. I support you in what you want. And let that sink into every cell of your body. And that's the response that a decent, healthy person will give you when you give a boundary or express yourself. They may not agree with you. They may have a different preference. However, they respect your feelings and they want to know your feelings, and they're welcoming you expressing yourself. Okay. That has to do with feelings and boundaries and needs. Another thing, well, I think that's the main thing also, is that for people who grew up in homes where feelings were not to be shown or expressed, which is very easy in a lot of most households, they don't know that they can trust their feelings. And that's one thing I had to work on myself, because whenever, even a few years ago, I had a date. I was supposed to go on a date with this guy, and I was feeling super anxious about it because he was being very evasive. And when I felt anxious, now I know when I feel anxious, it's because the person is being evasive, not forthcoming, hiding, manipulating. But I didn't know this at the time because I also grew up with childhood emotional neglect. Not that my parents were abusive, but there were things missing. And so my strategy would be, I shouldn't feel that way. How can I be okay with this? What is wrong with me? Why do I feel this way? How can I push this feeling away? And my focus was on, I got to figure out how to get this date to work out. In my marriage, my focus was on how can I be okay in this marriage when I'm so emotionally neglected and sexually emotionally neglected? How can I be okay with this in this marriage? How can I cope? How can I deal with it? How can I be okay with it? It's, compromise after compromise, shutting myself down, grappling with myself. What is wrong with me if I don't like what the guy likes? It's kind of like when you're in bed with the guy and he touches you in a way that doesn't feel good. And you're like, well, I should like what he likes. What's wrong with me for not liking it? And this all comes from us not having, being embodied in our feelings and trusting our feelings. When I say expressing our feelings, I never mean ranting, raving, unbridled self-expression, emotional vomiting. I'm always speaking of sharing our feelings in a healthy way. Like, I feel, I'm really mad right now, or I feel really disappointed when, or I feel really repulsed when this happens. And it can seem very strong to someone who isn't comfortable with their own feelings, but they have to be able to hear the other person. And dealing with feelings is really hard, and I think that's something that we as a society, that is something that we're waking up to now, is dealing with feelings. And the reason that a lot of these past relationships survived for so long is because people did deny their feelings. They were in unhealthy and toxic relationships. Even the one where Debbie said her parents had this perfect marriage, or people were like, my parents had this perfect marriage for 60 years, they never argued. If they never argued, something was wrong. There was a controller and a submissive codependent accomplice. Okay? Because people are going to argue. They're going to have differences. It doesn't mean that they're going to have fist fights or start yelling. people are going to have disagreements about how to decorate the house or how to spend the money or how to, how late to stay out or how to raise the kids or what house to live in or how much to spend on the home remodel. And if someone is always a yes man, that person's repressing a lot of stuff. So I think that what Debbie's problem is that she inadvertently turned out to be a people pleaser because she didn't get the experience of having her feelings mirrored, acknowledged, validated, having her needs, or even knowing that she's allowed to have needs, because she was supposed to be, women were supposed to be the submissive, quiet women who surrendered to the man and Christian and kind and forgiving. And that's all mental stuff if it's not coming from the body. My advice to people is, one of my friends recommended a book on emotions, which I just ordered, that I'm going to read. But my advice is to start listening to your body. Your body will tell you a lot. And a lot of people are disconnected from their body. They're just thinking. They're here from the head up, and they're just thinking. And our body will tell us when something isn't right, at least in my case. And the thing is to just start listening to it. Just start listening to what your body is telling you about situations that are healthy or unhealthy. And also learn that you're allowed to have needs. You're supposed to have needs. And you're supposed to tell your friends and your partners what your needs are, not to leave them guessing. This kind of goes to women who are faking orgasms. They're faking their orgasms because they don't know they're allowed to have needs in bed. They're not allowed to be embodied in bed and ask for what they want, or say, sometimes they fake the orgasm just because the guy's pressuring them. Just tell the guy, hey, I don't care if I have an orgasm. I'm enjoying this. You don't have to fake it. You don't have to push down your feelings. Part of the world waking up is honoring our feelings. That's something new in society. I mean, yeah, when in the past, the only feelings that people really showed were anger, hostility, war, fighting. That's not what I'm talking about with feelings. That's toxic outbursts or reactivity. When I'm talking about feelings, it's like I feel things. Like I know what I like and don't like. And these feelings are telling me something. And I'm going to communicate what these feelings are telling me about my autonomous state and your autonomous state. It's a practice. And I've been working on this for a while because my thing always was, questioning my feelings. Like if I wasn't happy with what was going on, what is wrong with me? You're supposed to be happy. And that goes along with another one of Debbie's mom's things, which was, we don't have any problems. We don't talk about problems because we have no problems. And if we don't talk about problems, then they don't exist because we can't deal with problems. Everything has to be happy, and you have a fake smile and you're not real. That's a lot of what's going on. So the world is waking up. We're evolving. We have feelings. We have to own them in our body. We have to feel in our body. We have to express our feelings in a responsive, not reactive way. And I think when people start doing that, they will no longer get into these unhealthy relationships, because when you start knowing what it feels like when you feel peaceful and you feel joyful and you feel safe and secure and happy, when someone comes along that when someone comes into your life and you feel anxious, you will be like, this is not aligned, this is bad. Or someone comes along and they make you feel hyper, like this person's too hyper. But it takes that being in our body, and really helpful to practice with someone, or just imagine in yourself, to have your feelings honored. You've got to start feeling that in your body. What does it feel like in your body when you feel heard, when you feel listened to, when you feel understood, when you feel validated? Yeah, I can see why that would upset you. That makes sense. Start writing those things down and really feel that in your body, because then when someone comes along who's violating that, who doesn't care how you feel, doesn't care what you want, or creates a lot of chaos and anxiety and lack of clarity, you'll notice it because you're in your body already, and they're taking you out of your natural peaceful state. And to trust your feelings, to trust what your body is telling you. And that's been a really hard thing for me. I've been getting better at it. And then to just tell people, I don't like how I feel around you, or this feels repulsive. It's like, I'm just practicing different things, and how I deal with people who are unclear. And there are a lot of people in the world who are not acting authentically or with intention or with clarity. So, it's like I can only be around people where the way they're talking to me and the way that they're being with me mirrors the peace and clarity that I already have. So I turn down a lot of work. I turn down a lot of clients that could be money, but they're not mirroring intention and clarity. So I'm very much use my feelings to guide me in my life, because I'm not here to be rich. I'm here to evolve, and I ask God for, what is it that you want me to do, God? And anyway, when I get that book, I'm really eager to get that book, because a huge thing that held me back in my relationships with men and that caused me pain was not knowing that my feelings were telling me things. Like, I would long for these men. Now, I was never with a narcissist, but it's still the same background. I would long for these men that weren't giving me the attention that I wanted, or were ignoring me, or were not interested in me. And I didn't realize that longing feeling meant that they weren't right for me. So this, what I'm telling you, applies to any kind of unhappy relationship. And then another thing I want to say about unhappy relationships, one thing that really woke me up, I was walking with a friend of mine on the pier a few years ago, and she was married to a guy who used to like arguing with her. And I was thinking, why would you be with a guy who argues with you? Because I would never deal with that at all. But I would be interested in men who would blow me off. And she said something to me very interesting that woke me up and shifted everything. She's like, why do you want to be with guys who don't want to be with you? And it woke me up. I'm like, you're right. It was almost like it broke the spell. And this might be helpful for you. If you're with a guy who doesn't care how you feel, I could say, why do you like guys who don't care how you feel? I remember one time I was on a phone call with some friends who were actually a family member that I'm not talking to right now, but she and her boyfriend were on the phone, and she was just laying into him and yelling at him. And I said, she was just going on, and I said, where did you learn to yell like that? And she suddenly stopped talking. It just was a mind shift. I think that when people ask those kinds of questions, where did you learn that? Why do you want that? It can really wake people up. So if you're a guy going for women who are helpless, I could ask you, Why do you want to be with women who are helpless? Why do you like women who are helpless? Or why do you like men who are controlling? Where did you learn to like men who are controlling? Where did you learn that? Those are the kinds of questions that can wake people up, because so many times we get stuck in these patterns that we can't see, and we have to go through so much pain. I had to go through so much pain before I finally got to the point that I was like, I cannot be in this relationship anymore. I want to keep growing, and I want to be with someone who lets me feel. And after I got divorced and I moved into this apartment, it's been a little over 10 years, I told myself, I will never, ever again be with any man who doesn't care how I feel. But then I had to learn that I had to get in touch with how I feel. And feelings are the basis of relationship. The number one thing that's important in a relationship is to know our own feelings, and to have empathy for the people that we're with, and to have empathy for our friends. Friendships are based on empathy. Like, I care how you feel. I care how you're doing. Checking in, this happened to you. You're applying for a job. Okay, my friend's applying for a job. The next day, check in. How did it go with that job? That's what friendships are about. And for people who grew up without that kind of care and that checking in and that connection, they don't even know what they're missing. So let's see, what else was I going to share about that? And also, you've got to be honest and make a list of, if a lot of people are so protective of their parents. Okay, make a list of all your parents' great qualities, how perfect they were. And then make a list of all their imperfect qualities and pick at least 5. 5 ways that your parents were imperfect, okay? They never asked you how you felt. They never asked you what you wanted. There was no allowance for any kind of disagreement. You were not allowed to disagree. You were not allowed to have feelings. Nobody cared what you wanted. Maybe they were impulsive. Maybe they were uncomfortable with closeness, so they worked all the time. Maybe they minimized problems. They minimized when you were abused by a neighbor. Oh no, that didn't happen. Oh, we don't tell anyone what happened in our home. They minimized things. They hid things, hoping it would go away. Maybe they were volatile. Maybe they were impatient. Maybe they didn't stick up for you or protect you. Maybe you couldn't go to them for comfort. Maybe they told you how you should feel, or you weren't allowed to have feelings. Maybe they denied your sexuality, that you weren't allowed to be a sexual being. I don't know, I'm just thinking of things right now off the cuff, but your parents were not perfect. There is no perfect being, and there was no perfect parent. And if you cannot see your parents' imperfections, you have work to do, because seeing their imperfections is part of gaining freedom as an adult. It doesn't mean you don't love them. You can still love them despite their imperfections, but we've got to be able to see those imperfections. And it doesn't mean they're bad, because we're here to grow and to learn. And your parents, as long as they're growing and learning and getting better, I think they're doing great. Anyway, so that's all I have to say on that. I think that to the extent that we can be embodied, we can have healthy relationships. If someone is not embodied, there's no way they can have a healthy relationship. And I'm thinking of all the women who start out as like super fawning over you, or they love bomb you sexually, or the guys who love bomb you. That's not embodied. That's fake. And if you're embodied, you're going to spot it. See, and that's why all those videos about how to spot a narcissist or how to spot this are not useful, because it's not on the level of the mind, it's on the level of the body that you're going to feel that. It's on the level of the body that you're going to feel anxiety, or when someone, is too pushy, or doesn't give you space, or deflects, or defends, or argues, or is impatient, or gets defensive. you're going to feel it in your body as a jolt, and you'll be like, this person is not right for me. There's drama, there's tension, there's anxiety, there's defensiveness and stonewalling. But if you're embodied, you will naturally not allow those people. You'll pick up on someone's indecisiveness and lack of clarity and lack of respect. So that's why it's so important to be embodied, to be in your body. Like, feel your body, feel your torso. What's going on in here? How do you feel in here? This is where your emotions are mostly stored, here in the front part of your body. How does it feel? And how does it feel when other people talk to you in a certain way? Do you feel annoyed? Do you feel angry? Do you feel scared? It's your body telling you something, you know, and that's the thing about life. Okay, we're spiritual beings. Like, we want to be full of love and forgiveness and all that in physical form. And in physical form, we have all those feelings. Okay, we have a body, we have muscles that we've got to exercise and work and challenge ourselves through pain. And we feel pain, emotional pain. If we repress that, we can't feel the love. That's the physical part of us. Just like there's light and there's dark. It's a polarity of the world. You cannot deny your physicality and think that you're going to be better off. It's called spiritual bypassing. So I think that what was the problem for Debbie Newell is that she has her parents on a pedestal. She speaks like a little girl because she's learned that if she acts sweet and innocent and submissive, then she's lovable, because she was never allowed to be herself. She was never allowed to be herself. But fortunately, she's a good mom. Her one daughter picked up on this Dirty John guy right away. She's like, Mom, I don't like him because he doesn't look me in the eye. So her kids are a lot more emotionally aware. And I'm not saying she's a bad mom, but she married this guy even though her kids didn't like him. And I'm not going to say it makes her a bad mom. I'm just saying she was not emotionally embodied because her childhood wasn't perfect. She grew up with childhood emotional neglect. I'm analyzing it. I think she grew up with childhood emotional neglect. She had her parents on a pedestal that they didn't deserve to be, and as long as they were on the pedestal, she can't see what they didn't give her. And that's the problem. They didn't validate her emotions, her needs, or her boundaries, so she never got that practice. And so every man she met who violated any of that, she didn't even know, because she'd never felt it. And I'm going to say that all the therapists she had, maybe they tried to go there with her and she just couldn't. She wasn't maybe ready to, because she so badly needed to have her parents on this pedestal. And that's the danger of putting our parents on a pedestal, is that it really blocks our personal growth and freeing us from our patterns. I can tell you, for me, I have the opposite problems. My parents are so full of flaws that I've always tried so hard to love them. Even though they weren't abusive, I was like, I don't like this, and I don't like this, and I don't like this. I don't like this. But I'm sure there are other things that I don't like that I haven't even seen. Because as kids, our need for attachment is so strong that we do not see our parents' flaws. So, thank you so much for watching my video, and check out the Dr. Ramani podcast. She's so